Okay.
And we are live. This is Addy Ads, Atticus Skywalker, YouTube's chosen one. This is Addy Chats, another episode. And we have an American guest this time, which is a nice change of pace from our Brits that are usually on, Mr. Charlie Robinson. Charlie, how are you doing?
I'm good. I've got all the Brits on my show too, so it's cool.
Yeah, we're actually sharing them a little bit.
I know. But hey, look, they've got good info and they've got a funny way of saying things, that resonates with Americans, and I love them. I love their sense of humor. I've been told, actually, people have said that I have a very British sense of humor, and it's probably true because I remember as a kid watching like Benny Hill shows and all this great wacky like British comedy and all that stuff. So
my mom would know what you're talking about. I don't know Benny Hill though.
Yeah, Benny Hill is just like what, in looking back on it, he was like a comedian guy, and they would speed up the footage like about twice as fast, so he'd be running away and all these girls would be chasing him. But if you watch it now in the context of Jimmy Savile, there's a little Jimmy Savile in him, unfortunately.
Really? Oh, yeah, wow. That is unfortunate.
Not the best.
We'll get into Mr. Savile later, but I just want to give people a brief intro on who Charlie is. I actually found Charlie via Sean Atwood's channel, and then I consequently watched at least one or two of your interviews with Kev Baker on the Kev Baker Show.
Yeah.
But Charlie is from Colorado, and he wrote The Octopus of Global Control, a controversial and humorous book that takes quotes from over 500 witnesses to some of history's greatest events. And he uses them to piece together and expose a century-long plan for world domination. He had a front row seat to the fraud and corruption in the mortgage industry during his career in Las Vegas real estate. And he credits John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, as the final piece of the puzzle that helped him to really see how the American government operates as the enforcement arm for multinational companies. And that is from Charlie's website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com, which I will, of course, include in the description box below. But Charlie, do you want to, because I've actually heard of that book before on Tim Ferriss's podcast. It's been mentioned several times. I haven't read it yet, but like many great people that I've noticed in just studying podcasts and history, it seems that this one book really influenced you and your philosophy.
Yeah. So it's funny because we were chatting about how you were in London and you interviewed Sean. Well, I went to London this last summer and did a show called Renegade Inc., which is on RT. You can find it on the RT website and everything. But it's a show done by a guy named Ross Ashcroft, who is the writer and producer and director of a documentary called Four Horsemen that came out in 2011, and it sort of details the economic collapse. And so I was in London and we were recording this, and then the cameras weren't rolling and we were just chatting, and he was asking me about my book and how it came to be. And I said, well, John Perkins who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman, was a huge inspiration to me because I was going through this. I was living in Las Vegas doing real estate, and I was out on a vacation, and somebody gave me that book to read, and just on my vacation. And I was so into it that I was having it was a scuba diving trip. And I remember being underwater diving and thinking to myself, when I'm excited to get up to the top, because when I get up to the top, I get to read another chapter of this guy's book. And so I'm explaining this to Ross. And the reason why I'm explaining it to Ross is because in Four Horsemen, John Perkins plays a huge role in his documentary. So we're chatting about that and everything. And I'm just telling how I'm inspired. And then we get into how my book came about, and that I chose to write it in total secrecy. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anybody. And part of the reason was because, like when you take on like a new task and you're like, oh, I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go do a podcast, and you tell all your friends, and then maybe you don't really do it, or you do a couple things and then it fizzles out. I didn't want to be on the hook for it. So part of the reason was I just didn't tell anyone because I didn't want that sort of obligation. I didn't want people to say, hey man, how's that book coming that you're working on? And then have me not actually write it. So I didn't say anything about that. And I also was afraid that if I said something about it, to my wife, she'd tell me to stop working on it. Like, oh, this is pointless. What are you doing? Don't waste your time on this. So I wrote it in secrecy. So I'm explaining this to Ross, and Ross says to me, John Perkins wrote his book the exact same way. And I was like, whoa, really? He's like, he didn't tell a soul. He didn't want someone to stop him. He didn't want word to get out. He didn't want any. And I was like, okay, cool. So, all right, well, we've got a little bit of that in common. And
that's awesome.
But the thing about his book that really struck me was that when he's describing, so he worked for a company called Maine, which is like Halliburton or Bechtel. It's a multinational engineering firm that goes in and rebuilds. They don't build houses. They build dams and freeways and airports and things like that. They build major construction projects. And so his job was, he worked for this company that was like a Halliburton, and he would go and get introduced to like the presidents of countries. And he would say to like the president of Ecuador, you've got the right sort of layout here and the right geography with these rivers running through, that if we put like a dam here, you could build like a hydroelectric power plant and it would generate all this electricity. And yeah, it would cost a little bit of money, but it would pay for itself. And then you'd have all your people would have electricity. They could learn to read at night. It'll be great. And, like they sell all these benefits. Oh, and by the way, we'll put some money in your pocket too. We'll make it worth your while. And so these countries are like, sure, like, well, we can't afford it. And he's like, don't worry. We've got the financing all set up by the World Bank and the IMF. They'll come in, they'll take care of you. You don't even have to worry about. So these countries sign up for this. They take out this huge multi-billion-dollar debt to build this thing. And then so they build the dam and it starts generating revenue, but it doesn't generate enough revenue to cover their payments. And they start to fall behind. And then they approach this country and they say, you owe us a lot of money for this dam and you're not paying us back. And they're like, well, it's not penciling out. And they say, well, we think we have a solution. Maybe what we can do is we can work this out. You guys vote our way in a UN resolution, vote the same way as the United States does, or you let the US put a military base here, or you privatize your lumber industry or your fishing industry and let our buddies buy it. So what I'm reading this book, and this is 2007, spring of 2007. And what I realize is that I'm living this on a smaller scale in Las Vegas, because I was in real estate and I was selling new homes. So I was, people would come in and want to buy a house, and we could get them qualified for a loan. Like the guy that I remember specifically was that there was a guy that came in and wanted to buy a house that was $405,000, and the guy picked oranges for a living. Like he really honestly picked fruit, and he was like a landscaper. So he landscaped things and he would pick fruit and all that stuff. And we qualified him, like we got him qualified for a loan. And I was like, this guy can't afford it. Like, and this poor guy is like, well, I guess I can afford it. Like you wouldn't be offering it to me if I couldn't afford it. Right. So
he doesn't know better.
He doesn't know any better. And I don't blame him, because he's just like, hey, I'm going to, he's a guy from Mexico who came over and he speaks a little bit of English, and man, this is going to be the American dream for him. He's going to like get it started with this one house, and everything went wrong, and the market tanked, and the banks took back all these, they loaned out all this money to these people, and then they took back tangible assets like these houses. And I was like, oh my God, like it occurred to me that I was involved in this. I didn't.
That you were a cog in the machine. You
got it. And I didn't realize it until reading John Perkins' book. And so then after that, the market sort of tanked, and I'm still, I don't live in Las Vegas, but I still work in Las Vegas real estate. I just kind of go back and forth and manage a real estate brokerage from Denver. So I'm still involved in real estate. Of course, I'm seeing sort of some very alarming things right now, which I think a lot of people
let's get into that later. So you're an author just as a hobby, essentially.
So the reason, yeah, exactly. The book came out of me. I don't have a formal background in writing. I'm not a journal. I didn't go to, journalism school or anything like that. I didn't work for newspapers or anything like that. I have no respect for the mainstream media at all. So it's not like I think that they went to journalism school, therefore they're better journalists. No, none of that matters. They're controlled. But it came out of a conversation that I just had one day with my mom, who said, hey, you've got all this great information. I told her about some new conspiracy I'd discovered, or some new topic. And she's like, this is cool. This is really interesting. And you've got all this information. What are you going to do about it? and I didn't have an answer. I mean, it never crossed my mind that I had to do anything. And so once I had that, then I started to say, well, maybe I should write something. So I had notes that I'd written. And then like I said, I just went in, at night, like I'd go to bed and like sneak out of bed and go to my office and like type. I mean, it was crazy. It was like, I was like sneaking around writing a book. And it's funny that when the book finally came out, like the first shipment came to my house, I wasn't there to intercept it. My wife was, and she opened this box thinking it was going to be something else. And there's all these books, and she pulls it out and sees my picture on the back, and she just said, "Get out." She just, when I came home, she was, "Get out of the house." So she threw me out of the house for 2 days because of that, because
oh my goodness,
she said I was like emotionally cheating on her. I was like, well, listen, I don't have like a secret family somewhere. I mean, this could be a lot worse than how you're making it out to be. I think she's fine with it now, but at the time she wasn't thrilled. So
it's something like a shit test from your mom to get your button gear doing something.
No kidding, huh?
But that's really cool that you basically are professional in 2 careers now because of this interest. Now you're an established author. And what just talking more about your writing, did you have, because you were writing in secret, and before I get to that question, I just want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about not telling people about something you're working on. And it's interesting because there's this cognitive bias called consistency bias, where it's basically, if I could explain it in layman's terms, unless you already know it, Charlie, is that you behave according to how you think other people view you. So like Naval Ravikant mentioned this, in that if you have a goal, you should tell everybody about it, because then you'll feel, I guess, social accountability to do it. But for you, it's actually the opposite. It's I need to tell no one, and then have kind of like tunnel vision to get this done, which just shows that that's how bad you wanted it, is completely intrinsically driven.
Well, I was afraid that I was afraid what would happen if I told everyone I was going to do it and then I didn't do it. Then everyone would be like, not that my friends would really care. They might bust my balls a little bit, but like for the most part, they'd be like, "Hey, how's that book coming?" And I'd say, "Well, I never wrote it." And they'd just be like, "Oh, okay." But I didn't even want to have that happen. So I didn't want to set an expectation. And part of the reason was I didn't know how I would feel about writing it. So what I decided instead of doing that was I said, all right, first, I'm just not going to say anything to anyone. I'm just going to write it, and I'll just keep writing and see how I feel. If it fizzles out and it doesn't go anywhere, then whatever. I didn't tell anyone. There's no obligation to it. But if I enjoy it, and if I feel like I'm getting someplace, then I'll just keep writing, and then I'll cross that bridge at that point. And once I got to that point where I just was writing, enjoying it, and felt like I was going to keep writing, then I was like, okay, now I don't want to stop. And so then it changed from me not wanting to have the expectation of people holding me accountable for this book that I may or may not write, to then it was, I don't want to tell anybody in case somebody comes up and says, that's a stupid idea, and it gets in my head, and then I believe that that's a stupid idea. Or my wife says, you can't do this. You don't have the time to do it. We've got priorities. This isn't one of them. Something like that. So then it shifted from me not wanting to be obligated to it. Then it was like me not wanting someone to tell me to stop.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. And I think it's important for people to, I guess, pick up on that, because it just reminds me, and I'll get to my question here. It reminds me of Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was talking about training in pumping iron. He says he almost goes cold a little bit, like psychologically, and where he just has to shut everyone out because he wants to achieve that goal. And that's something I've noticed too with, I don't know how, I mean, I'm sure you've noticed changes in behavior in people around you recently, Charlie.
Oh yeah.
Just trying to do my own stuff. Like I've really had to like actively put in energy to block people's, kind of frantic energy around me out to get this done. So I think it's important to talk about, and I think important to teach if you can. But as far as your writing process, Charlie, did you get into a routine after a while? It sounds like you did. Or how did you do that? You just sat down with a cup of coffee in the morning, or do you go late at night, or what do you do? So
I'll give you, I'll tell you on a couple of books. So the first book is The Octopus. That's the one I wrote in total secrecy. So with that one, I just wrote when I could. Like if my wife was out, at work and I was home, I would write. So wherever I had time, I would write. Then the second one is a book that hasn't even come out yet. It's a book with Jeff Berwick, who is the Dollar Vigilante. He owns a company called the Dollar Vigilante, and he also puts on this event called in Acapulco, Mexico, the largest anarchist convention. So with that one, I was more upfront about what I was doing with my wife. I said, I'm writing this book with Jeff. And then my wife and daughter went away on vacation, and I stayed home. And then in that particular case, my routine was this. So it was just me, and this was all I was working on. It was during the summer, and I had 6 weeks. And so what I did was I would wake up around 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd go to the gym for an hour. I'd come back. I'd make breakfast. I'd start writing by about 10 o'clock. I'd write from 10 o'clock in the morning till about 8 o'clock at night. And then I would eat an edible. And then I would start doing all of the footnotes for the next 2 hours while that edible kicked in. And then I would watch SportsCenter and go to bed. And then I'd wake up the next morning. I would do the same thing. And in both cases with this new book that will be coming out and the Octopus, the way I wrote them is something that I think a lot of people might get scared off of the concept of writing a book, but I'll explain how I did it. And it's less scary when you do it this way. So for every new topic, I didn't start on page 1 and end on page 540 for the Octopus or any of the books. And there's a third one that I'm working on already. What I did was I opened a new Word document for each concept and just wrote there. So if I woke up one morning and the police state was big in my head, like that's all I was kind of focusing on, even if I hadn't started that chapter yet, I would start a new Word document, police state, and I'd write as much as I could there, and I'd save it. And I'd have a folder on my computer. And when I got done, I had a folder with 50 different Word documents on it, each one a different topic. And I would just make sure that each one of those was complete. Then I would get sticky notes, and I'd write the name of each one of these concepts on a sticky note, and I'd go to my long dining room table, and then I laid out the 8 tentacles of the octopus, which was like military control, governmental control, covert control, scientific, spiritual, media, all these. And I would put all those down, and then I would take the sticky notes and I would just figure out which chapter was going to go where, lay it out that way. Then I would build it. So I just assembled the book like that, 50 chapters, putting them in different order, and then filled in like about a paragraph that would connect the two together, find some common thread between them and assemble it all.
Okay.
And so that's how I wrote it. So I know some people like to start on chapter 1 and write the introduction, all that. And that's fine if that works for you, but I've just done it this different way because some days you don't know, some days something's more interesting or something's more pressing. It's in the top of your mind and you're like, I just really want to focus on that or something. So
right. There's a certain energy that catches you, or
yeah. When I'm just like really pissed off about something, they're like fired up about it, like either mad or happy or whatever, but just emotional. I have some energy about it. I will write that and then put that away. And then if tomorrow I feel like writing about that, I'll do that until it's finished, and then it goes in the completed folder. And so that's kind of how I did it. So you can kind of I bounced around from topic to topic to topic. And then as far as the Octopus, one of the things you read in that intro is that I had quotes from over 500 different people that had either some relationship to these events or they at least had an interesting take on it. And so I also had a separate document that was all of these quotes from Rockefellers and Rothschilds and Clintons and Bushes and Joe Rogan and Bill Hicks and George Carlin and all these guys. So then as I would get to a part that and I had a pretty good idea of what the quotes, there wound up being 700 quotes in the book, but they're from 500 different people. I had a pretty good idea of whether I'd be like, oh, this is a good one for that section. Then I would drop it in. So
okay,
that's kind of how I built it.
You kind of bounced around based on how you were feeling or what you were reading, what you were thinking at the time. At what point in the process did you, maybe this was right away before you started, did you realize it was 8?
Oh, I knew it was 8 from the beginning. I knew there were 8 because it was just because it was the octopus. So I laid out the first thing I did was
based it off your symbolism.
For sure. Yeah. And it's not, and I didn't come up with the concept of the octopus. In fact, one of the quotes that I put in the book that's really good is this description from the mayor of New York City, where he's talking about this sprawling octopus with its tentacles in the courthouses and the media and governments and all this. And he's talking about this, he's talking about the Rockefeller standard interest or Standard Oil interest is what he described it. And you get to the bottom and you read this quote and you realize that the guy said it in 1922. And you're like, God damn, the octopus concept has been around for, 100 years or so. And Danny Castellero wrote a book called The Octopus. So it wasn't new. I mean, I didn't invent it. It wasn't my idea, but I did like the concept of the octopus because it's an animal that's, first of all, it's known to, change colors and look different depending on its situation. We know about it spraying ink, which is a distraction so it can get away. It's really fast. They're very intelligent, manipulative. They know how to, you can see videos of them learning how to open up mason jars underwater and get crabs out that are in there and things like that. And I saw one
video where they... It was like in a pet store, and the octopus at night would like crawl out of the aquarium, play with toys, and then put the toys away before the owners came back. And they didn't know this until they looked at the security footage. It's kind of interesting.
They're super intelligent. And so I thought about all these things, and they've also got a hidden beak that you don't really see until it's too late. If it gets you, it'll tear you apart. So I thought, well, this is kind of a good symbolism for these maniacs that are running the show because they have similar tendencies. They can camouflage themselves and fit in. They come change, they can spray ink. They can manipulate you because they're intelligent. They can stay and fight or flee and come to fight another day. So all these,
whatever tactic is the best for survival is the one that's going to be used. Yeah,
for sure. And then the cover art for my book is let me grab it really fast.
Yeah, I can pull it up too, Charlie.
Oh, okay. Well, this particular cartoonish octopus, I changed the color from yellow to red, but it came from, that's the logo that is on the National Reconnaissance Office, NROL-33, I think. One of the spy satellites that they launched has that big octopus logo on it, and above it says "Nothing is beyond our reach." And I was like,
"Our government launched that."
What's that?
That was our government.
Yeah, our government launched that.
Okay.
In fact, if people go on YouTube or wherever and they search Jon Stewart show, NROL. He even did a segment about it where he's like, check this shit out. Are you kidding me? So he was goofing on the fact that they were so blatant in their logos. And so anyway, I just, between the octopus concept, the 8 tentacles, which worked for me as far as the 8 different ways they control people, it all sort of lined up. But then within those 8 tentacles, I might have 7 or 8 different, Word document sections for each one, so
okay. And when did you know you were done, Charlie?
That's a good question because the book was 780 pages before I cut it down to 540. Nobody wants 780 pages.
That's a lot of cutting out to do.
Nobody wants 540 either, to be honest. But but it's tough. It's tough to know when you're done. But I got to the point where, just in terms of page count, it was too much. So then I just had to trim out everything that I thought wasn't necessary. And the whole time I was doing that, I was thinking about how, I'm not a musician, but I was thinking about it must be difficult for musicians. Like, how do they know when a song's done? You know what I mean? And so I guess they just kind of know. So you can tinker around with it forever and make yourself nuts. But at some point you have to say, okay, we're done. And be done with it. So that's what I did. And when that happened, I sent it all off, and then it became the book. So
wow, yeah. Da Vinci said, "Art is never finished; it's merely abandoned." So it comes to mind when you talk about not knowing exactly when to end, always.
Yeah, it's tough. And I, and so other people that are like professional writers, they probably have, I'm assuming they have different ways of tackling their writing projects. And I don't know that mine would work for everybody, but it worked for me. And it worked for me in the sense that it allowed me to break it down into just much smaller pieces to manage and finish. Like you can write like a 5-page treatment on a particular topic. And that's really all I'm doing in this is I'm writing that about a particular topic, then moving on to another one. Whereas I think somebody that is telling like a story, you have to start at the beginning and end with the ending. And so for those people, maybe it has to flow and you have to start at the beginning and work your way down. But in my case, since I wasn't really tied to it following any sort of storyline, except to say that the storyline is about control. So I did have to put it together that way. But if someone doesn't want to read 540 pages, but they get the book and they just flip it and open right to the middle and start reading, they'll be fine. They might want to read the beginning to get caught up on some other things, but it'll still make sense to them. It'll still explain whatever topic, or you can go through. I did make sure to make in the table of contents, I did make sure to give the chapters funny names or, interesting names and stuff so that people can go through and look at the table of contents and then go, oh, that sounds interesting to me. What does as Federal Express mean? Well, it's talking about the Federal Reserve. Or what is, I don't.
And you write with a certain degree of humor, from what I can tell. And this is what I think that's a great strength you have, Charlie, is you have such a great and easygoing way of communicating to people. You're is Colorado considered the Midwest? I'm not really. I guess.
Yeah. I guess I've only been here for 4 years. I'm really from Southern California, but
you are okay.
But yeah, so I took the so for one, the topics are heavy duty. You know what I mean? We're talking about
they're really dark.
They're dark, so you've got to inject some humor into it. And I kind of stole. I put a quote in there from Joe Rogan, and the Joe Rogan quote is talking about Jon Stewart, and I connected to both of those guys. And what Joe Rogan was saying was, I always liked The Daily Show and Jon Stewart because he was giving me news and talking about real stories that were very serious, but he would do it in a way that was humorous. And so I would find myself laughing at these, and this, I'm paraphrasing his quote, but it was along those lines. I find myself laughing at the stories, but yet still getting the information of what the story was about at the same time. And so I was like, yeah, that's kind of how I have to do it. I've got to inject some humor in there. So yeah, I accuse Lindsey Graham of owning multiple black dildos in it, which he probably does. And I fuck with everybody in the book, but it's because I feel like, otherwise you'll be jumping off your roof, when you start to read about how all these people have been enslaved by the banking system and how the governments do this and that to you and how they use sexual blackmail to control people. And you're like, oh my God, if you don't have
when I learned that was just talking about the darkness of it and needing that humor, which like I said, Charlie, you're such a outgoing and positive guy. It's almost like paradoxical that you're so interested in this stuff. But I think that's important because you make it easy for almost anybody to listen to you, because you're like, oh, this guy seems like, not only is he eloquent, but he's animated and he's making it entertaining too. Which I think is important. But yeah, just learning about the sexual blackmail, that was actually towards the end of last year. With the Epstein thing, I just couldn't stop reading about it, man. And it took me like weeks to process, because I was like, I just kept thinking about it. I was like, dude, that is so messed up. And it just, I don't know, it's weird because like I've been doing this thing recently where I like see people, whoever, an old man or the big ripped guy or the beautiful girl, and I just for a second I think about them when they were children, and I'm just like, man, it's so weird. All those people used to be innocent children, and now they're just evil.
Yeah, it's a dark. Oh man, the sexual blackmail component of it is, like anything, it's there and they use it because it's really effective. It's like false flags. People are like, what's a false flag? Once you learn what a false flag is, and you go, well, they do this to us, and you're like, oh yeah, they do this to us because it works. And so,
can you explain that term, Charlie? I actually am not familiar with that.
False flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. False flag is think of the old pirates, the pirate ships. So a pirate ship is out in the ocean, and they want to take over they see another ship coming, and it's flying, say, the Dutch flag, and they go, oh, that's a Dutch ship over there. They probably have good spices on there. We're going to rob them. So what they do in their pirate ship is they put up the Dutch flag as well. And so that'll allow them to get close enough to the person. And as soon as they get close enough to that ship, the ship realizes they're not Dutch like us. They drop the flag, I don't know if they actually put up the skull and bones.
Do they wait and then do it and then jump, or do they just jump?
I think maybe they just jump. I don't know. It depends on if the movie cameras are there to film it or not. But but they would just, so it was or that's kind of where the origin of it came from. But you think back to World War II when they to kick off of World War II, they said, oh, the Polish army attacked the Germans, and
they claimed it was like a radio station or something.
Yeah. But it was just Germans dressed up as Poles,
just going into Poland.
Right. And then they say, oh, the Polish attacked us. See, now we have the reason to go in there and attack them. So that's a false flag attack. And that is what's kicked off every single major war that over the last at least 100 years. World War I, II, Vietnam, both Gulf Wars, all of it, all was started by false flags. So that's how things get kicked off. So that's, these topics are dark, obviously the sexual blackmail thing is dark. And once you start to learn about it, then what you realize is that, it's been around for a long, long time. Jeffrey Epstein and those guys that they didn't invented.
He's been in power since like the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been doing that. Maybe who knows?
What do you think? Just as a little exercise.
Yeah. So so my initial thought, and it's funny because it ties back into Sean Atwood as well. My initial thought, first of all, I'm in the camp with everybody else. He did not kill himself. Okay. We don't think that, but so it's between, was he murdered and did they sneak him out? Initially I thought they snuck him out. And the reason why I thought that is because now I understand that wouldn't happen for anybody else. But in this guy's particular case, he had access to powerful people. He had information that powerful people wanted not talked about. There's lots of connections to the jails. There's funny looking images of the guy on the gurney being wheeled out and does his nose match, does his ears match, and things like that. So I initially went down that route of okay, they probably smuggled him out and replaced him with a dummy or did something.
Yeah.
But then
you switched.
But I switched, and it came from a conversation with Sean Atwood about this. And what he was saying, in these operations, if a guy gets busted by the feds and then is getting interrogated and is working with the feds, there is no reason why this organization above Jeffrey Epstein would incentivize or show anybody else that will take you out, will pull you out of harm's way, give you plastic surgery, take you to Israel and, hide you there. Because by doing that, they would then send the message to anybody else that if they talk, it's okay, we'll bail you out, we'll come and get you. He said that what would really happen is if you're a guy in Jeffrey Epstein's situation with all this information and you get arrested by the feds and you start talking, you're dead.
Yeah.
And that is to send the message to anybody else. You talk, you die. So
I thought about it from the way that I can't remember who I heard it from. It might have been Sean, because Sean understands these things better than anyone. But they said basically, what would be the easiest thing to do? Like, do you know how hard that would be to sneak somebody out? The easiest thing to do would be just to kill him. Not to mention the fact that they're trying to send a message, But the fact that they did do that just shows me that. To me, the way he behaved, it seemed like he thought he was going to be. He thought he was invincible, So it shows me that
I would have felt that way too if I was him.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows me that that's not actually true. And somebody, maybe there was some duplicity that he maybe fell for, or maybe he didn't know that he didn't have all the cards that he did.
Yeah, see,
Which is
it's
like
hard to,
why, like, maybe Ghislaine Maxwell actually was, she was the queen on the chessboard. Really, she's actually more powerful.
I think so too. Yeah, and I think that it's hard to run a secret child blackmail sexual entrapment operation when everybody knows that you're running a secret child blackmail sexual entrapment operation. So it doesn't really do any. He had no value at that point.
Yeah,
And these are not guys that tend to
be sentimental
and keep someone around just because they've been a good soldier. So I think that it's more likely that that he was murdered, but I can't fully rule out the possibility of him being removed, and I would rule that out with just about everybody else. But if this one guy did have the best connections, and he had a lot of people with a vested interest in keeping this guy either quiet or happy, or definitely quiet, but maybe even happy. So if we could remove him from this situation, then it's almost assured that he won't talk about the stuff that we've done together, or the information yet. But then again, the simplest answer is just whack him.
Yeah, it makes the most sense for sure.
Sense.
And I don't know. What do you think about Weinstein? Is he going to get whacked or coronavirus? Or
oh boy, that's a good question.
Well, I think he already contracted it. Actually, I don't know what his health is like. But do you think he's going to get Epstein? Or
I don't know. I don't know that he's. Well, I mean, he's already been sentenced, so he can't really. He can talk if he wants, but who's going to listen to him? In Epstein's case, he was still awaiting trial, so he had every reason to. He had the ability to talk and then change what he's looking at, or maybe they could, make a deal with him. But in Harvey Weinstein's case right now, he could talk, but it's not going to improve him. Damage is done. He's in prison unless somebody unless Trump gets him out, or you know what I mean? Like
that's pretty much the only thing I see happening as far as like him getting released.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if he would have been whacked, he would have been whacked by now. Just going back a bit, Charlie, what did you just in terms of your routine and stuff, when you had that like kind of like 6 week period of deep work, what were you doing for your gym workouts?
Well, at the time, the community where I lived had its own little gym. So I would just walk down there, and it was do like half an hour of, I'd do 45 minutes of weights and then half an hour of cardio. And then I would feel like I had a bit of a clear head. And then, so just free weights and
some cardio and free weights. Okay.
Cardio and free weights. Yeah. Kept me feeling good, but also part of what made that time so effective for me was that, like I said, my wife and daughter were gone. And so it was just me and the cats,
no distractions.
No distractions. And so I could sit there and just write and write and write. And it worked well. So I knocked out almost the whole book doing that, but Jeff Berwick is doing his part too. So he's contributing, his components to the book as well. And we're putting it all together. So everything's kind of done and ready to go. I kind of wished we had his last edits done, a couple weeks ago before this thing kind of ended for this new book, because this new book is about the working titles, The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. And so it's talking about how all of the things in this, all the components of what we kind of experience day to day in America, how they seem really solid, but like the legs can go really fast and everything can come down. And like I said, I wish we'd gotten it out sooner because of that, we're experiencing this. Yeah, exactly. What we're seeing right now is how fast, boom, things can go. And we didn't talk too much about epidemics in there, but I'm already sort of adding more to it right now. So we're taking advantage of the fact that it's not out right now, so we can add a little bit more to it about this.
Can your book be checked out at libraries, Charlie?
No, I don't think so. The paperback version of the Octopus is available on barnesandnoble.com and Amazon, and then the digital version is available on both of those places as well as my website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. So when people buy the digital version from me on my website through PayPal, just donate $10 or more, and I send you 2 copies. I send a PDF and an EPUB version, and then what I tell people to do is just read it and like give it to your friends. And I don't care if you share it. Like, I'm not interested in selling 1 million copies of it. Like, if you like the book in the digital format, just you have my permission to just send it to your buddies. So
definitely, that's awesome, Charlie. And I like I said, I haven't read it, but I'm going to. I've been listening to your podcast, Macro Aggressions with Charlie Robinson, and I have to tell you that I actually wasn't sure if it was your official account. I think, dude, you should add the your social media links and stuff. Are you on Twitter, or did you actually get booted?
I was on Twitter and I got booted. I got kicked off right when I came back. Well, I'm back on now under a new account. So I have like 110 followers. So,
okay. Yeah, send it to me and I'll put it in the description box, because I was trying to find you and I couldn't. And then I did find a link and it said you got your account terminated. I was like, well, I'm not really that surprised, but
so ironically, this is what got me kicked off of Twitter the first time around. And it's not like I had a ton of I had like over 1,000, but whatever. I still had people that would think I would be there, and then all of a sudden one day they go and I'm gone. So what happened? I was coming back from Acapulco this year, so it was like the middle of February, and I was in the airport. I was just waiting for my flight, and someone posted something like a tweet, and then I made a comment in the tweet, and my comment got me kicked off of Twitter. And all I said was, it was the tweet was about Bill Gates, and I said, okay, when are we all going to throw this guy in a volcano? That's all I said. Just totally joking. Yeah. And they kicked me off for inciting violence, and I was like, "Get the fuck out of here with that!" So
it's stuff like that. It's like, it makes me think that they have certain people, singled out. It's because your account was. How big was your account before?
I had like 1,000 people.
Okay, that's not big at all if you know Twitter. So
no, I'm nobody. Weird, there. And
I'm definitely looking forward to following you, though. I don't know if you were tweeting a lot or.
But now this is sort of the devious part of it, is that now it's self-censorship. So now with all this Bill Gates stuff out there everywhere, everyone's like, I hate Bill Gates and let's arrest Bill Gates. I'm like, listen, I agree. I've been screaming about this guy for a while. Be careful, because like even the slightest like joking I'm clearly not going to take Bill Gates and throw him into a volcano. I'm just not going to do it.
We know you have that capability, Charlie, but we also know you're not going to do it.
I'm not going to do it. If someone else decides to do it, then I will cheer for them. But the fact that they thought that was enough to throw me off, is like, hey, just come on. But I had been suspended so many times. It's probably why I was on the short list with them. Anything that just even remotely, but even the times I was suspended, it was over ridiculous stuff. So like Sam Tripoli and I are friends, and he does Tinfoil Hat podcast, and he made he did a tweet, and my response to the tweet was jokingly, I said, retarded, retarded, retarded. And that got me put in Twitter jail for a week for that. I was like,
yeah, I was listening to your podcast with Sam Tripoli. It's pretty animated, dude. I don't understand the censorship thing. And just speaking on self-censorship, Charlie, because you mentioned that, I don't know. I mean, me and you are in different demographics. I'm a young guy, and I just went to university a couple of years ago at a very liberal school. And speaking personally on my own journey with politics, it was something that I actively ignored, and because I was just occupied with sports growing up, and it really didn't interest me, because I could see that people weren't really interested in having an actual debate about it. But it got to the point in 2016, as you know, any Americans know, that I just couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
And I became aware of the fact that, oh, wow, I am self-censoring. I am afraid of what to say in classes and in social settings because of, the political climate. And it got to this point with this pandemic, and we can talk more about Bill Gates and that in a second here. But where I was like, I don't know, it gets to the point where this is kind of a soft war, and it's simmering. And when there's blood on the line and my family on the line, I just don't care anymore. It's just, it gets to the point where, and maybe I should have got there sooner. I don't know, but this is, growing up when I did, this is how I reacted to it. I don't know if you want to speak on that, Charlie.
Yeah. So I went to USC in LA for college from 90 to 95. So I was there, it was just a different world. I mean, the only thing that we didn't have the social justice warriors and safe spaces and all that dog shit. We just had riots. we had the Rodney King riots while I was there. So that's about the most interesting thing. But I was talking to Sam about this, about how, like, when you go out and do comedy, I said, can you even go to colleges and do? He's like, no way. Are you kidding? He's like, no way. But that used to be the sweet spot for comedians.
Yeah, right. You think it would,
Oh, it would be great. You have a great audience, you have the right demographic. I remember at USC, they would bring in bands that would play on campus, and they would bring in comedians and all that stuff. And so I asked Sam about that, and he said, there is no possible way I would ever play a college, because he said all it takes is one person to be offended, and they're
it's a problem. A big problem.
It's a big problem. And that's not doing anybody any good. I mean, they're not protecting. I don't know what they think they're accomplishing by, like, oh, I'm sensitive and I'm offended by, what you can do if you're offended? You can leave. You can turn off the channel. You can turn off the YouTube video or the podcast or whatever. There's plenty of things that you can do if you're offended.
You can laugh too. That's
or you can laugh. Exactly. You can be like, well, this guy, I don't have anything in common with him, but he's fun. So, like, it's turned into a real crazy time. And like I said, the self-censorship is the most devious component of it. And I'm not proud to say that I'm self-censoring, because it's the worst thing you can do. But I am also now aware of what is going on social media platforms, where they are looking for excuses to kick people like me off. And Facebook, I've been in Facebook jail plenty of times, and the Twitter thing. And so I now realize that, and I've had videos taken off of YouTube for mentioning.
Sean was actually saying today he just did a live stream for the first time. I didn't listen to very much of it because I was getting ready for our interview, but he was saying that if you mention 5G at all now, YouTube is taking that video down and flagging you and all that.
Yeah,
just to put another hammer on that point. I had another YouTube account. And my first YouTube account, I was making like World War II videos because I find it really interesting, the history of that time period.
I want to see your stuff because I'm way into World War II videos, by the way.
Yeah, I would love to send you it. They're not on the internet anymore because they got taken down for hate speech. My first channel got terminated, and it was really weird timing too. It could be a complete coincidence, but it was right after I went into Canada. So I don't know if that's like
interesting.
Yeah, something happened because he's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "Oh, I'm a YouTuber and I'm meeting up with somebody or whatever." So I don't know if he looked me up or if he was just bored and it was 2 p.m. in the afternoon and he was just giving this American guy a little bit of harder time than he needed to. But either way, I flagging and terminating YouTube accounts for hate speech, and it's not just me too. Other history channels documentary channels too are getting flagged for just reporting what has actually happened in the past.
It's crazy. Yeah. And that is a product of the Atlantic Council and the Poynter Institute and the German Marshall Fund, all these non-government organizations and think tanks that are then leaning on Facebooks and Twitter and YouTube and telling them, you got to get rid of all this content here. And so it's coming from above them. It's coming from above social media. They're given the directives. You've got guys like David Brock, who's a bundler for Hillary Clinton, who is talking about how, he's being very upfront in his organization, Media Matters, and he's put out a letter to his investors, and he's saying, this is what we've done. We've got Facebook, and we've got Google, and we've got Twitter. They've already signed on board. So we've got this to get rid of, to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't have another run in 2020. They've already agreed to do, and you're like reading this letter. I mean, I've got the letter. It's like 24 pages long. And it's like, this is not meant for the public to see, but it explains what they're doing. And it is that we have gone to these organizations and we have leveraged our influence to get them to silence all of these people. We've told them what we want. And then you have Zach Voorhees coming out, of former Google employee, who's saying, he was working there saying, I found the blacklist. I found the list of all the terms that are blacklisted. If you mention any of these things in YouTube videos, they don't show up anymore for people. So
yeah, I've noticed such a change in YouTube from, I didn't start posting. Well, I posted a few videos when I was a kid, but I never, stayed committed to it consistently until recently. But I've always been a consumer of YouTube since that time period. And yeah, you just notice like it's just looking more and more like cable or dish. Like when you press the guide button, it's like, dude, this is why I go to YouTube, is to not go, to see this. It's becoming more and more corporatized because of that. And like there are videos on YouTube that I can only go to because I've gone to them in the past and I know the exact title, or I have the link. Because if you literally, I'll type in the exact title and I have to scroll down and it's exactly the same title, and it's like, so you have to see like 4 or 5 or 6 other videos of, I don't know, a sponsor or whatever is being pushed, until you get to your favorite video that you used to watch all the time or whatever. And it's scary.
And David Icke is now on the warpath, and has been for a while, but he's just going after YouTube, and I love it because my show Macroaggressions is on David Icke's platform, Iconic, and yesterday all of our videos were taken down by Vimeo. Vimeo is the hoster that hosts all the videos for Iconic, and yesterday Vimeo was put under pressure by the UK government to get rid of all of Iconic videos. So all my first 4 episodes of my show, they're all down right now. They're currently working to get all those videos for all of the different shows that are on Iconic back up.
And so Iconic is David Icke's media platform that he runs via Vimeo, but all your episodes on YouTube, they're still there?
For now. Yeah, for now they are. And the podcast itself, the Macroaggressions podcast, is out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and iHeartRadio and a bunch of places there. The audio only version, but the video version is on Iconic and also now on YouTube. So the YouTube's up, but Iconic is down. And that's David Icke and Jamie Icke and Gareth Icke, his 2 sons. That's their platform that they put together. And there's some really good shows on there, really fascinating stuff. It costs like $10 a month to be a subscriber there, but you get really good content. So it's a shame. And they went after it. They went after Iconic because they thought that he had put that London Real interview up on Iconic, which in fact he actually didn't. But so they're just
Brian Rose did, or
David Icke didn't put it up on Iconic. Okay. They thought he did. But it's been fascinating to watch. So I watched the first London Real interview with David Icke that came out 3 weeks ago that got 8 million views. And then this other one, I was one of the 65,000 people that was watching it live. And I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched as much of it as I could. And then it gets taken down. Well, when you're talking about these sorts of topics that Brian and David were talking about in this show, and then YouTube kills it off of their platform after the live stream ends, and then the government freaks out about it, it has the exact opposite effect from what they're trying to do. All it does is make people want to go watch this video and go find it, which is
scarcity principle.
You got it. It's the Streisand effect. When Barbara Streisand was complaining about all the people on her beach in Malibu, then everyone said, first of all, they said, screw you, Barbara Streisand. And second of all, they said, let's go to Barbara Streisand's beach, so it has the exact opposite effect. So if you want to draw, they did the same thing when the TED Talk with Graham Hancock, his War on Consciousness TED Talk, he did that. They put it up, they took it down immediately and banned it. And then all that did was create an underground market for it. And now people have seen it 10 million plus times. So they don't learn. Wow. They're going to make David Icke famous. He was on the cover of I don't know, the Daily, one of the Telegraph, one of the newspapers yesterday in the UK.
It's probably safe to say he is famous. Yeah. I mean, famous. Yeah.
Yeah. He's famous. Well, he's famous in certain circles. I mean,
yeah.
And infamous in others. But it's funny because the people that are out to get him and the people that have a real problem with his work don't know his work. It's funny. I was at, I spoke at Anarchapulco this year and last year. And last year, David Icke spoke as well. And so one of the guys I was there with, or one of the guys that I was hanging out with at the event, is a journalist, but he didn't know who David Icke was. I said, well, this will be interesting for me to see your reaction to it. So I said, he goes, all I know about him is that a lot of people call him anti-Semitic. And I go, it's interesting you say that because the guy that was saying that was Jewish. I said, well, so watch it's a 4-hour presentation at Anarchapulco. So watch it with me. And then afterwards, I'm interested to hear your opinion. So afterwards we went outside and we were talking about it. And I said, so anti-Semitic? He goes, not at all. And I said, what was your impression of David Icke? He said, well, that is a guy who is talking about some very important things in a real logical way. And it all makes a whole lot of sense the way he explains it. I go, there you go. Do you understand now why people are so terrified of him? And he said, now I understand why the people in positions of power are terrified of this guy, because he's a nice older guy who's got a good sense of humor, and he's talking about things and he's backing them up with proof. And he does it in a way that's very entertaining, easy to understand, and makes a lot of sense. And I said, yeah, that's David Icke for you. He's not anti-Semitic. He's not pushing for this or that. And ironically, I was chatting with David and at the airport after Anarchapulco. We were on the same plane out. And so we were talking for a little bit, and then he was going to LA and I was going to Denver. And by the time I got home, he had been banned from Australia. He was going to LA because he was going from LA to Australia to start a big speaking tour there. And by the time he got to LA, he was banned from Australia by the country. Flat out, they revoked his visa, wouldn't allow him to go, even though he'd been there like 7 times. So it's like, okay, well, you understand once again that when you ban people from talking about these things, it only makes people want to dig into what they're talking about even more. So yeah,
and I need to get more into David Icke. I've seen a few of his interviews, and I want to read his book along with your book too. I want to get to yours first, but I know I've heard so many people within this sphere list him as either their biggest influence or a big influence on their philosophy and work.
He's with me. With me, it's John Perkins and David Icke for sure. And to have the ability to go from some dude who's just answering a question from my mom about what are you going to do with this information to then have my own show on his platform is like, I'm just so humbled and amazed that has happened, because I have so much respect for the guy and for his work, and he's fearless too. I mean, you want to talk about, they were relentlessly fucked with him in the UK for decades, and just everybody made him out to be this crazy person. The fact that he went through all that and didn't lash out and didn't just destroy people with, he could be on the "I Told You So" tour now.
And that was his high times for that. Like,
and it's the things that he's been talking about, the things about Jimmy Savile and the things about the pedophile monarchy and the things, all these things. I said, you're out of your mind 2 decades ago. Everybody owes David Icke an apology for this stuff, because a lot of what he was talking about in these books, and it's not like he just secretly talked about this stuff. He wrote books about it. He put the books out. They're out there. You can see when they're copyrighted, when the date is. So he's been talking about it for a long time. And at some point you have to just acknowledge that maybe this guy has a better source of information than the rest of us. And maybe he's a little bit more objective about it, because the mainstream media is garbage. And of course they work to protect the establishment. So if you challenge the establishment, they just sick the media on you. And the media does a very good job of discrediting you, making people think that you're crazy, and making you seem like a unhinged lunatic, because the media is very, very powerful. But you can only do that for so long. When a guy can show a track record of just year after year, book after book, calling out these events well in advance, and then having them come true, and you just kind of have to point. So I would say get into David Icke's work. You can find on probably on, I think still on YouTube, although boy, they don't like him, but you can find some of his live events, his live speeches where he's doing his presentations and at Wembley or some other places. That'll give you a good condensed, if you don't have enough time to just sit down and read the whole book right away. If you watched one of those, they tend to be rather long. Like the Wembley one, it was like 8 hours. So they break it up into chunks, and like the dude sweating through his shirt, he's so animated and so he's so into it.
Wow,
I just have a respect for him. I mean,
I think he's coming from a good place, and for people who don't have time to read the book or can't maybe get a hold of a copy, that is a great option, is to listen to Icke's his online content that is free on YouTube. And get it while it's still there. And you mentioned Jimmy Savile again, Charlie. So let's talk about the royal family, because talking to lots of Englanders and having visited London a few times, I actually just finished The Crown on Netflix a few weeks ago well. So I'm polishing up on my English history.
Yeah.
And as regards to child trafficking, it seems that the Tories and the Democrats here, so the righties in England and across the pond, the lefties here, seem to be the usual suspects for whatever reason. And it's just so weird watching The Crown and seeing, and this is after I learned a lot of these things about Lord Mountbatten and Ted Heath. It's weird. Do you want to comment on that stuff?
Yeah. So in conjunction with, when you think about the Epstein situation, and I'll tie this into the UK politics with Ted Heath. You see Epstein, we now know about who he was. Now, I've known about Epstein for years and years, but for the average person that has no interest in this stuff, they now know who Jeffrey Epstein is, and they know he was running sexual blackmail operations. So part of that is that you use this footage that you've got, or this information that you've got, to leverage somebody into doing something that you want, or to keep them quiet about something. And it's very effective because they can't go to the police about it. They just have to deal with it. So a lot of these people that are in high positions of politics, when we think of job interviews, we think of like someone posts a job, 5 candidates go and apply for that job, and they take their resumes and they do their interviews. Then the person doing the hiring will find the best candidate that's got went to the best school and seems the most engaged and the best fit for that. And then they'll pick them. But in politics, what happens is that they take those 5 candidates and they look for the worst one. And the reason why they look for the worst one is because they want the degenerate alcoholic, the scumbaggy guy. They want the guy that's cheating on his wife, or that's closeted homosexual, or a pedophile, or whatever, because they want to know your secrets. And usually those people are psychopaths or narcissists or money hungry or just predators or whatever. So they tend to flow to positions of power like government. So rather than weed these guys out early on for being pedophiles and psychopaths, they actually promote them. Because once you've got a pedophile in office and you know they're a pedophile, then you control them fully.
They're
So,
like a clone.
you're like exactly. That's exactly right. So like it's hard to run for president. It's hard to be president. It's easier to get the goods on the president than you become president yourself because you run that guy. So in the case of Ted Heath, so going back to this, in the early run up to the EU, the European Union, was a thing called the EEC, the European Economic Commission, and that was the building blocks of putting all these countries together. They did it from a financial standpoint first before they tried to integrate the countries together. So this was in like I want to say the 70s, I think.
Okay.
And Ted Heath was the prime minister, and Ted Heath was negotiating. So one of the things that in this EEC was the fishing rights that the United Kingdom had, or or Great Britain had to fish around their island. They're obviously an island, and so the fishing rights are a huge component of it. And at the time, they had 77% of the fishing rights in that region. And after
Which historically makes sense because of Great Britain's dominance of the seas.
For sure. After this EEC deal, they only had 22%. They had given the bulk of it away. And everyone is going, why would we do this? Why would we agree to this deal? What is Ted Heath doing for England? Like, he's screwing us up. Well, it turns out that Ted Heath was a notorious pedophile who would take boys out on his boat, rape them, murder them, and then throw them off the boat. And the Germans, well, at least, I mean, the rumors that the Germans knew it, somebody knew it, might not have been the Germans for sure, but the rumors that the Germans knew it and manipulated him into a bad deal based on that. So a lot of times when people are now looking back at history and these political decisions that have been made, it helps now if you incorporate this additional question. Was this person being manipulated? Was this person being blackmailed? Because if you find somebody who says, a politician who says, I'll never do this, I'll never do this, I'll never do this, and then they get into office and they do exactly that, sometimes it's because they're just liars, and sometimes it's because they intended to not do that, but they got the goods on them and they forced them to do it. And so if you look back on some of these decisions throughout history through that lens, they start to make a lot more sense as to why someone would agree to do something like this. And Jimmy Savile was running, I mean, amongst other things, he was running a sexual blackmail operation for sure. He had the goods on a lot of people.
And he was introduced to the royal family via Lord Mountbatten, who was into little boys. Very
much into little boys. Jimmy Savile was into
both,
everything. Everything and dead people, apparently.
Sure, anything.
Yeah.
That guy was a freak. And it's crazy is he looked like how you would expect him to look, just so ugly.
It's like the evilness in his soul just like manifest in his physical appearance. There's a good documentary that you can find. I've only seen it on YouTube, but I think if people search Jimmy Savile, something like, was Jimmy Savile a wizard? Then there's a documentary that I've watched. I've actually watched it twice, and it ties in all of the symbolism of the things that he was using, like his, he always had his cigar, and they talked about that being his wand and the necklaces he wore and the rings that he wore and all of these things. They laid out a pretty good case that he was in fact a wizard. Now I know that sounds a little Lord of the Rings-ish, but these people that are in these high-ranking, like whether it's monarchies or government or high level of banking, there is an overriding theme that I know loses a lot of people when you mention this, but there is a Luciferian component to what they're into. And it has to do, like, a lot of us will say, like, get out of here with that stuff, man. Nobody can, that stuff's hocus pocus. Nobody thinks that stuff really matters. Well, it matters to them. It's a big deal to them. And they seem to think, whether it actually has power or they perceive it to have power, they think that these rituals are part of what keeps them together. They also have, like the blood in, blood out oath that, the Crips and Bloods have, like, hey, man, you want to be a part of this gang? You got to commit a robbery in front of us. Well, in their case, they have some even more sinister things that are required in order to join the club. And you
for initiation.
Your initiation. You have guys like Ronald Bernard, who's the Dutch banker, talking about how he was involved in this in the high levels of banking. And it got to a point where the next part of what they wanted him to do was to murder a child. And he just couldn't do it. And he just broke down in tears. And he's relaying this story on video, and it's heartbreaking, but he's talking about that's where they are in this. They're in that level. Cause if you're in a position where you're murdering a child during a ritual event, then you have witnesses. They probably have video of it. You're in. There's no expiration date on that, man. You're in. If you're on film,
you can't really explain your way out of that.
No, there's no way. You can't explain your way out. There's no expiration date on the pedophilia component to it either. So back in the old days when they'd catch you cheating on your wife and blackmail you, or maybe you were a closeted homosexual in Washington D.C. working in Congress, and they'd say, if this gets out, it'll ruin your career. Okay. But nowadays those things don't really carry much weight. But if you're a pedophile and they got the goods on you for that
always works.
It always works, man. They own you forever. And so part of what makes Jimmy Savile, people wonder, like, why is Jimmy Savile so connected to the royal family? Well, he's got the goods on them. They needed him as a procurer of children. He needed them for fame and wealth and protection. And so it becomes this mutually parasitic relationship these guys have, where they keep each other safe, and they make the decision that, like, as these investigations go up the ladder, you get to the police chief or the head of MI5 or whatever, and then all of a sudden it stops.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened? We know what happened. That guy is either in on this stuff as well. He's part of the club, or the people that are in part of the club have expressed to him that this investigation stops, or else your kids wind up dead. And it's real easy to control people. It really is.
When I was in London at the beginning of this year, I interviewed this detective for Scotland Yard who is now retired, and his name is John Wedgard. I don't know if you've heard of him, Charlie. Yeah. Have you spoken with him yet?
No, I haven't, but I know who he is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would, if you'd be open to it, I could definitely send you his info, because I think you guys would have a lot to talk about. Yeah. Something similar happened to him in the fact that he was a whistleblower, and it basically had to do with child prostitution and but prostitution in general, but especially with children, and it basically got shut down. The investigation did exactly how you described. But I think it would be cool for you guys to chat about that. But as far as where you're at in Colorado, Charlie, what is, because we actually haven't even discussed this pandemic yet, what is the situation like? Because you guys are on lockdown. I don't know who your governor is, but you guys are on lockdown like the rest of us, as far as I know.
So it's so when it all kind of went down, we were in Florida. And so we were like, because we were on vacation, and at my in-laws' beach house. And so it was really normal there. There wasn't, we knew it was happening. Obviously then towards the end of that week, then it started. This is the week of, I don't know. This is maybe 3 weeks ago. So we're talking like the middle of March, right? When it all started to kick off. Then we started to go into these restaurants that we'd been going into for years and years, but we'd gone into a restaurant earlier that week and everything was fine. Then by the end of the week, it was like every other table had been removed, for the social distancing stuff. We're like, all right, well, this is slowly, kicking in. And by the time we got back to Colorado, they had made the decision that everyone was on lockdown. And so I work from home. So to me, it wasn't as big of a deal. My wife's, the company my wife works for has, 500 people. They fired half of them. She's in the travel industry. So boom. So there's a lot of jobs going away, a lot of reduction in salary and things like that. So it was, we've noticed it in that sense. When you go out and go to the grocery store or anything, there's just fewer people. It's just weird. It's just surreal. There's a movie, there's an old 80s movie that I liked, like when I was like, I don't know, 11 years old or something. It was called Night of the Comet. And in this movie, a comet goes by Earth, and it kills it turns everybody into like little piles of dust, but a few people made it through, and they all had unique reasons for it, but it had something to do with one guy was like sleeping in a barn that had a tin roof, and that tin roof protected him from the cosmic rays of the comet, whatever. But anyway, he wound up going out into public with a couple of the people that made it with him, and they were just like, there was nobody there. There were all these cars parked everywhere. A guy drives by in a Ferrari, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "Hey, I like your car." And he's like, "Great." He's like, "Oh, you like it? I have 86 more of them at home." You know, he's just been going around collecting all these things. And it made me think of Night of the Comet, because it's like, there's nobody out, but all the stores are still there. So it's not like everything is like abandoned. So, I mean, some of them are shut down, but it's just a very bizarre vibe out here.
Yeah. There's a horror thriller that I watched a couple years ago, actually, when I was in high school, and it's literally the only horror movie that I can somewhat tolerate. But it's called The Crazies, and it kind of reminded me of that, because they would go into stores and everybody would seem to be normal, but they were actually infected, some of them. And I've
heard about that. I know what you're talking about. I haven't seen the movie, but I've heard.
It's actually pretty good writing for a horror movie, because most of them are just gore sessions, which I'm not about personally. But if you're about that, that's cool. But yeah, I like the writing it's pretty good for a horror movie in that sense. But yeah, it's weird, man. Yesterday was different, because it was really beautiful here in the PNW. I think in Washington too, people are saying it was really sunny yesterday, because it's been raining a lot and been really overcast. So that was nice, but you did see quite a few people out because of that. But what about when you guys, unless I don't know if you're the one who's doing the errands or not, as far as running out into town, but are people wearing your area or? Yeah. People
are wearing masks. Some of them are wearing gloves. Some people are just like, this is all nonsense. Like, I'm not really worried about it. And some people are overly worried about it. And it's hard to kind of tell where to be in this spectrum of concern. I mean, I think that if you're somebody that's has a compromised immune system, maybe stay home or something, but I think that goes for anything, right? I mean, like if you're really compromised and it's hardcore bad flu season, you'd want to be careful about that. Don't go to grandma's house, right? If grandma's older and you've got little kids that maybe, common sense, but shutting down the whole economy because of this, I'll tell you what, I have some, I tried to be as measured as I could early on until I could gather as much information as possible. But the more this goes on, the more this is making me think that this is nothing but a gigantic overreaction. I understand that some people are dying. This is how I came to this. This is how it started for me. We are getting information from 5 different sources early on, 5 different sources. All of them have no credibility and are not trustworthy at all. Chinese government, Chinese media, American government, American media, and the CDC. I don't trust any of those organizations at all with anything. So that's where the news started from. So I was instantly skeptical about it all, because I just don't trust any of those people. Now, when you start to hear about people dying, so I still don't know anybody that has it. I don't know anybody that's died from it. I know people that have been in, like Jason Goodman from Crowdsource the Truth, and my friend Billy Ray Valentine, who does the Infinite Fringe. Both of those guys are New Yorkers. They both have had video cameras. They've gone from hospital to hospital, and they're showing footage. They're like, there's nobody here. There's nobody here. There's ambulance drivers. They're interviewing ambulance drivers that are leaning up against the ambulance, waiting to do something. My friend Jason goes up, who's a reporter. He goes, let me ask you, how many coronavirus cases have you had? He's like, a few. He goes, well, like a few, like 2, or a few, like 100. And he goes, 3. He goes, all right, well, and they all had coronavirus. Did you test them? How do you know? And he goes, no, we didn't test them. They just had the symptoms. So we assume that that's what they are, but 3. So he's like, okay, so you've been doing this for like a week now and you've had 3. And he's like, that's right. He's like, and you don't even know for sure if those 3 have the virus. He's like, that's correct. He's like, what's going on here? And the guy's like, I don't know. I don't, so there's that. And then there's other people that are like, my uncle died from it. And so, and I'm not going to discount that.
No, of course not.
But I just don't know. I don't know. There's a disconnect. There are some people that have a very different version of reality. To them, it is as real as anything has ever been. Like my friend, like I said, Billy Ray Valentine is out there filming hospitals saying there's nobody at the hospital. But then he's also saying, I have friends that have had family members die. So he's like, I know that the alternative media is saying all this stuff is fake, and he's in the alternative media. And he's like, and I know I should be saying all these things are fake because I went to the hospital and there was nobody there. He goes, but I also know people that have family members that have actually died. So he's like, I'm thinking that it's real. So it's real for some people. It's not real for other people. It doesn't even, I tell you what, in terms of what it's done to us as a society and the economy, doesn't even matter whether it's real or exaggerated or totally fake, because the damage has been done, and it has screwed everything up, and it's created, even more division between us. You've got half the people saying this is nonsense, and then you've got the other half saying, don't get within 6 feet of me or I'll call the police, or you're going to the store and you don't have a uniform on and you're not social distancing and you've been reported. And you're like, fuck you. So there's a lot of this really like unfortunate, like panic, and you don't know how much of it is true or not. And this I blame the media for this. But first of all, the media is not your friend. But if they want to, let's just pretend that the media was really all of a sudden decided to care about you and wanted to put out the most relevant and accurate information possible about this disease. They're going to put all their politics and lying aside. They're just going to tell you the most important things about this disease. Well, I can't trust them, and I can't trust them now. Yeah, because they're the boys
who cried wolf.
That's exactly right. They have lied to us for so long about so many small things that don't matter. Now we've got a real event, and they're coming out and they're saying, you have to wear masks. We need more ventilators. You have to stay 6 feet away. And my response is, well, if you're saying it in the mainstream media, then I know it's fake. Yeah, so I'll do the exact opposite.
And the thing is, they said the opposite. Did you see that? The WHO guy? That is, look, if this is, and I'm going off of what the leaders are supposed leaders are saying, when you have Milley saying we're on a war footing and all this, and then you have the Surgeon General saying that we don't to stop buying masks, and they don't do a whole lot. Well, this guy I was talking to, Kevin McCarran, he's a PhD in neurobio. He made the point that, well, if we are on a war footing, that guy should be court-martialed, because that's gross incompetence resulting in mass death if you guys are telling the truth. Yeah. So, it's like, what's the story here? And like you said, it's weird because, like, for me personally, speaking for myself, I have several people in my family, in my immediate family too, a sibling who's extremely vulnerable to this. But at the same time, I'm trying to be level-headed and rational about it too, and realize that the problem seems to always come back to the trust in information and the lack of trust in informational sources. That seems to be the key problem for everyone here.
Yeah, and I feel like the media says we have problems with people not taking the social distancing seriously and everything. It's like, well, the problem is with you. The problem
you are the fucking problem.
You're the problem, because if you guys, you have no credibility. If you're CNN, and if CNN tells you anything correct, it's by accident. They just don't care, man. They have a history of lying to people. I mean, you can bring up, they have literally been involved in the starting of wars based on their lies. The Naraya, the girl who went to they were taking the babies out of the incubator and leaving them to die on the cold hospital floors. That was a straight up lie, pure propaganda play. It's not even debated anymore. Even Wikipedia knows that this is true, and they spun that as the truth. They sold that. So So the media has no credibility, and the CDC has no credibility. The CDC is a vaccine company masquerading as a regulatory agency. They make most of their money from selling vaccines, so they can't be trusted about this at all, because all they want to do.
You think they're in bed with Big Pharma? Or
absolutely they are. They're 100% in bed with Big Pharma. There's a revolving door between the people that are running the CDC. Hell, Julie Gerberding, who was running the CDC, their vaccine division, took a job, left there, approved a bunch of vaccines for Merck, then went and took a job with Merck, getting paid $5 million a year. So this is how it works. So the CDC can't be trusted. Bill Gates can't be trusted. World Health Organization can't be trusted. Gates Foundation can't be trusted. So you've got the least trustworthy people in the world on camera telling you, believe me. And I just can't. Right. I just can't believe them. And I shouldn't believe them. They haven't earned the right to be believed. They've been busted lying so many times that they have no credibility. They have no footing. They have no basis to tell people what to believe. And now, if this is a real pandemic that is literally going to kill 65 million people, like they war gamed it out in Event 201, then we should be listening to them, but we can't listen to them because they've been busted lying before. So, and not just little lies, big lies, big lies. So
not white lies. And that's one reason that I started doing this live broadcasting, Charlie, is because yes, the situation right now, it's simmering, and it's been simmering, and it's getting warmer. Maybe we're reaching an apex. The thing is, we don't know, because it's such a multivariable equation, and it's not even an equation. It's a graph that keeps just changing. It is an equation, but it does keep changing. So we don't know. It affects financial, economical, obviously the biomedical, and I don't know. I mean, it just seems like I want to make use of my liberty to speak, to have freedom of speech, and to connect with people around the world. I want to use it while I can.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to, because I do foresee, okay, it could be, this could be a boon in the long run, right? We learn from it. We don't let the government and the media take advantage of us. We have masks and gloves and proper sanitary, precautions and supplies in our houses, et cetera, et cetera. We're set for a few weeks. Or this leads to World War III, which I do think is a possibility, and not a huge one, but we could be going down that road of martial law, losing all your rights. You can't broadcast. So for me, it was like, I'm trying to talk to these people that I really respect and whose work I'm interested in while I still can, and make use of these freedoms that we have in this great country. Because I do believe in it, and I do have confidence in our principles as a country, not so much as the people who are currently leading it.
For sure. And I had this conversation with James Corbett, actually, from Corbett Report. He did a documentary called Medical Martial Law 2020. And like most of James' stuff, it's phenomenal. But it came out on March 21st. And he used a segment from an interview that he and I did together in this documentary that he put out. And one of the things that we were talking about was this, and this was what James was talking about. What if, and he prefaced it by saying, I don't even really want to put this out into the world, but I know that the social engineers have already thought of this. But he says, what if they roll this out and it's like a soft medical martial law where we're all in our houses and we have volunteered, we've just decided we're going to go into our homes and we're going to lock, not go out, and we're going to, shelter in place and do all these things. And this goes on for a couple of weeks. And then it lifts all of a sudden, boom, it just goes away. And they say, all right, we're past the brunt of it. Business is open. You guys can go back out, just be safe and be careful and do all this stuff. And we go back to our lives. He says, then what winds up happening is that in our heads, it's, well, martial law came and it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. That wasn't
then,
martial law.
and then the next time one of these things comes, because it'll obviously come again, it'll be like, oh, we got to go do that thing where we get in the house again. You're like, oh,
And watch
okay, yeah.
Netflix.
And we watch Netflix, and it's not all that bad. We kind of willingly go in, and then it's longer, and then it's even more severe, and then you know what I mean. And so it is.
It gets people comfortable with the idea of it.
For sure. This is
very passively and very kind of insidiously almost.
Yeah. And so that's one of the questions I had for James was, what if this is, the best kind, if you're an authoritarian maniac, the best kind of censorship is self-censorship for people. So what is the best kind of martial law? Self-martial law. Right?
Yeah.
Where you
it's the one where the citizens are reporting on each other, right?
For sure. Yeah. Then you allow that societal component of ratting on your neighbor, the societal peer pressure to then take hold, and they can enforce it for you, where you don't even need a standing army to do it. So then it becomes like, hey, you can't go out without your mask because you're endangering the rest of us. It's the same thing with the vaccine debate, which is you got to get your vaccines, because if you don't get your vaccines, then you're going to get all our kids sick. And you're like, hey man, if your vaccines work so well, then your kid has a magic bubble around him. So what are you worried about? And they don't have an answer for that argument, of course. But you'll wind up just fighting with idiots all day long that are like, put your mask on. And you're like, screw you, so this is what it'll be. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be overt martial law where you have troops on every street corner. That may come, of course, but it can also be this more devious form of self-quarantine, which is,
I read some of the Time Life series on World War II, which is just phenomenal, and I highly recommend people check it out. I actually haven't read them all, but I learned that the Nazis, they ran the entire country of Norway with like 800 Germans, and the rest were collaborators. The rest were collaborators. The entire country of Norway was ran by 800 Germans. And the thing is, they couldn't have done this otherwise. They didn't have enough people. The collaboration is required. In those types of situations, like the Netherlands too, most of the police force, they just switched over, started working for the Nazis, like with the the exception of a select few. So when there's kind of overreach of the centralized forces happens, they rely on citizens snitching on each other and collaborating with them.
For sure. The Department of Homeland Security under Janet Napolitano rolled out a program called "If You See Something, Say Something." Oh, you mean like Edward Snowden did? Yeah, I'm going to get right on that. Or you mean like Thomas Drake? All these people that saw something and then said something, like Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, all these people that saw something, said something, and then how were they treated? They were treated like criminals. They were buried under the prison. So this stuff it doesn't work well. And I would remind people, like these collaborators that want to work with the government and be snitches. Well, you know what also happened during World War II with the rise of Hitler was, he had the brown shirts, which were his little army that he rose up with, and they took care of all those people. But he grew a parallel army alongside that he didn't tell them about, which was the SS. And then once the brown shirts did their thing, he sucked the SS on the brown shirts and wiped them all out. So all you cops that think that you're just going to go, you're going to go work you're going to be on the government's payroll. When they want to put martial law, you're going to enforce it and everything. Be very careful, because when they're done with you, they will get rid of you. That's how it always works. So, collaborators, and even Eric Garcetti in LA, who's put out the mayor of LA said, talking about, oh, well, snitches get rewarded. Oh, really? They get rewarded? They don't get rewarded in prison. And so they're encouraging.
Who said that, Charlie?
The mayor of LA.
Oh my goodness. He said that this week?
He said it. Yeah, he said it this week, or maybe a couple days ago at least. So
another thing too is they had this, and I thought that this is where you're going with that. Not only are just in reference to the collaborators, when the Allies liberated the Netherlands, this was known as Hatchet Day, because they knew who the traitors were, they knew who the collaborators were, and they hunted them down. Be very careful about taking jumping on to be on the government side, because the government is
has no loyalty. They have no loyalty. And let's face it, all these cops and everything that, like when you see the yellow vest protests in France and everything, those cops are one bounced paycheck away from switching sides, So it's not like they are doing that out of like the goodness of their heart. They're being
It's like
paid.
a proxy battle, essentially.
Yeah, it is. It really is a proxy battle. In fact, when Occupy Wall Street happened, and they allowed that to go for a while, and then all of a sudden there were a million cops there to crack down on things. Those cops were paid for by Citigroup. They hired them to go in there and get those dirty hippies out of the.
So they were just private.
They were cops, but they were paid. Their overtime was picked up, and the Citigroup just paid the bill for all of them. So
that's
they basically
like mercenary work, essentially.
Exactly. And if those cops hadn't agreed to do it, they would have brought in Blackwater.
Yeah, which is the professional mercenaries, for those that don't know.
Professional mercenaries. Yeah.
Charlie, what do you and let me know, I want to be respectful of your time because I know you have an interview later, but
yeah,
do you want to talk about 5G before we wrap up? Because I know that's another huge topic right now.
Yeah,
I've done a little bit of research on it, and I actually emailed a physics teacher I had in high school, probably the smartest teacher I ever had, and he said his best answer was that long term there have been studies that have shown cancer increase in leukemia. And he told me that was his best answer, but I know people, and especially not in our country so much, Charlie, but in England, are really concerned about this. What do you think?
Well, it's one of these new words that will get you potentially deplatformed. So let's not call it 5 whatever. We'll just call it 5 whatever, just to see if we can dance around this a little bit. I think we know what we mean. And
I will out of the title, Charlie.
Yeah. And I will preface this by saying I'm not a physicist. I'm not an electrical engineer. I don't know the details of that. I do know it's millimeter wave technology, which is the same thing that when you go in the body scanners at TSA, or you put your hands up and that thing does the circle around you like an MRI. It's using that same technology. That technology is not good for human beings. That is not something you want. It unstructures the water in your cells. It's very, very bad for you. And this 5 whatever is not, it's so that you have 2G and then you go 3G and then you go 4G and then you go the next. So the G's in that stands for generation, but the 5 whatever does not stand for generation. It's not just the next upgrade. It's a whole different system.
Yeah, it's a different wavelength.
Yeah, and they have to put a ton of these repeaters in there, a ton of boxes, because it doesn't broadcast widely like Wi-Fi or radio signals or anything like that, where you can just put a very tall antenna and it'll blanket an area. These have to be lower to the ground, and there have to be more of them, and they have to be constantly, spraying their electronic wavelengths around for it to kick in. It has not been tested on human beings. The telecom industry says, oh, well, it's safe. It's not safe. It might be safe. Let me just put it that way. It could be safe, but where are the studies to show that it's safe? They're just saying that it's safe.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been tested. And that's a huge problem. And that's one of the things that got David Icke in a lot of trouble with his London Real interview, was because he talked about that. Now they took it out of context and they spun it, where he said that the media said that he was telling people that 5 whatever causes coronavirus. That isn't what he said. What he said was 5 whatever weakens your immune system. And when you have a weakened immune system from this, then anything can get you, including the coronavirus.
Yeah.
So just to be clear with what he was actually talking about. So it's dangerous. It's part of a control grid that they are laying down. It's part of the Internet of Things that we've been hearing about for years and years, where a trillion different electronic gadgets are going to be coming online, where your refrigerator can talk to your toaster, and you can figure out when you're running low on bread, and it can send a signal to Amazon to order you more bread. I mean, all these things are tied into this is their plan for it. But it is, it's something that people need to be aware of. It's something that people need to actively be mindful of. If you've got kids and your kids are in a school and they've just put 5G in there, you might want to go have a talk with the principal and say, what are you doing? Where's the safety study showing this is safe to put this around our kids? I'll tell you what, right now in this country, you turn on TV, or, it's been this way for the last 20 years. you get 1 million ads for lawyers that say, have you been hurt by mesothelioma? Contact us for our class action law. 15 years from now, all those ads will be, have you been hurt by 5G? Contact our law office. We're doing class action lawsuits, just like glyphosate with Monsanto, just like cigarettes, just like asbestos, just like all this stuff. 5G will be the new one, and it'll be too late at that point, because the people that are in charge of making the decision on all these things, they hate you. They hate you. They want us all dead. I know that sounds like a big statement, but they literally have a depopulation agenda. You can get into it in my book. I go into pretty good detail on this. 5G solves a lot of problems for them. It allows them to bring in this new version of the Internet of Things, which is going to vastly change the way we deal with technology, but it also is going to sicken people in the process, and they're totally fine with that, because it gives their buddies at Big Pharma a reason to have more drugs to cure this mystery illness. And people are, let's not forget that Wuhan is the first city that flipped on their 5 whatever at the same time that all of a sudden this virus started happening to people. It started affecting people in a big way. So it's not unrealistic to talk about the discussion between, is there a connection between those two things?
Yeah.
It may be that the answer is no, there's no connection. But when someone's trying to tell you you're not allowed to have that conversation, well, like anything else, you got to have the conversation then, because it's worth talking about. It's worth discussing. And we're in a real early stage here, where we
still are. Yeah.
We'll watch this video a year from now and we'll be like, oh, wow, we had some insight on some of these things and we got it right. And then other things will be like, wow, we were way off. So we're figuring it out. It's not, we don't know. We don't have it all. We don't have the benefit of hindsight, but what we do know, what we can say about the coronavirus situation and the 5 whatever is that the people that are telling you it's safe, 5 whatever is safe, and the people that are telling you you have to be fearful of coronavirus and all these things are the least trustworthy sources for any information you can find. So you just have to discount what they're saying by a factor of, I don't know, whatever your formula is that you use in your own head to discount somebody that you don't trust. Apply that to these people, because they have, they have agendas going on. Bill Gates is a reprehensible human being. He has a very dark agenda going on. And, part of that, you look back into his family history. So when he's telling you things aren't going to return to normal until you take the vaccine, you have to question what's in that vaccine, because it's coming from Bill Gates, who has a history of loading up vaccines with sterilants and polio vaccines that have given 47,500 Indian children the polio that they were trying to avoid from with the vaccine.
Yeah, I saw that in one of your podcasts. You said that India kicked them out. The government
kicked them out.
Right?
Gates Foundation is out of India. The whole country. They're gone, because they said, we're tired of you coming in here with your vaccines that are supposed to cure these illnesses. And then when you are done vaccinating, all we have is a bunch of kids with those illnesses. It didn't take too long for them to figure it out, that they were giving the kids the viruses that they were claiming, they were giving them the diseases that they were claiming to eradicate.
And they were calling, you believe, Charlie?
For sure. Absolutely. Because when you're Bill Gates and these guys, they have a depopulation mentality. They want the third world especially to just go away. They want most of these people removed from the planet. So they sterilize them or they poison them with these things. It's what's going on. It sounds crazy. The first time you hear
that's what the Nazis did.
For sure. Bill Gates is that term Nazi gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah,
but Bill Gates he qualifies as he would have been Heinrich Himmler in the SS. He would have no problem lining people up. He would have no problem doing any of this. It's for the greater good. It's for the greater Germany. It's for the whatever. So Bill Gates,
think because I don't think the two necessarily go in hand. And the two, I mean, is eugenics and racism. Do you think that Bill Gates is also racist, or it has more so to do with economic disparity?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that if you're going to be a eugenicist, there's probably a racial component to it. I would think that but it might be that he just sees, like a guy like Henry Kissinger just describes people as useless eaters. I don't think he cares whether you're brown or black or yellow.
Yeah, it's just a number.
Just a number.
Yeah.
I think he probably is fine with white people, but then there's some white people that he'd probably like to get rid of. I don't know Henry Kissinger. I know his work. I know that he's one of the worst human beings on the planet right now. And I know that Bill Gates is a huge fan of his. So, my guess is that it's probably a combination. I would say racism plays some role in it, but in their warped minds, they also feel like they are making the tough decisions that need to be made that nobody else is willing to make, but they're going to step up and do this because they care. This is how they spin it. And they might care. They might think that they're caring by getting rid of like the weakest links on the planet, the people that are down at the bottom, because in their mind, it's once we get rid of them, then we as a species can then rise and we'll be just, there's only so many resources to go around. It should go
wages
to the ones that
go up, more resources for the rest of us, the smart and the rich, right?
Right. But in their core, they think they're better than everyone else, and they want the lesser people to go away. Now, Bill Gates Sr. Was the president of Planned Parenthood, so he has been involved in Planned Parenthood was started by Margaret Sanger, who is a hardcore eugenicist, racist maniac. And I put her in my book. I put lots of quotes from her in there because they're so out of control that you think that they're fake, but they're real. And then you read,
she kind of like a figurehead in feminism, Margaret Sanger?
She that's how screwed up things are, that she was treated as a figurehead in feminism. In fact, Hillary Clinton is a huge fan of Margaret Sanger. But just read Margaret Sanger's work and you'll be like, I don't know that I would publicly announce that I am a huge fan of this lady's work under any circumstances. She talks about like the most compassionate thing that we can do to the young, to a young baby is to kill them. That's the most compassionate thing. You're like, were you drunk and like stated this at like to your friends, or did you say this in front of a microphone? Like it's a weird.
This is such a salient topic to Charlie, especially for I think young people, because all they hear is, oh, you don't think women should have birth control, or you think men should have total control over women's sexuality, which I mean, in reality, it's, in my opinion, almost completely the opposite. But so never mind that. But just the ability to think about nuances within this, and the fact that some of these people who quote unquote are social justice warriors are radical, and they don't have good intentions.
For sure. And look, I'm all for fairness. I'm all for equality and all of those things. I'm married. I have a daughter. I want the best things for women and all that. But there is something to be said for people that take it too far and are, a little bit more on the, authoritarian side when it comes to some of this stuff. Like, and also I just think social justice warriors are just idiotic, because
they're not very developed people, because they have this need in my eyes to show people that they are good people. But it's such a low level of thinking in my eyes. I don't know. I mean, I went to religious schools growing up, and one of my grandfathers was a pastor. So I was, I guess, fortunate in that sense to have a intellectual understanding of higher level ethics and morality. But I don't know. It's weird. They just have this need to be recognized as I'm a good person, and that is not a good sentiment to have. I mean, the Tao Te Ching says something to the effect of virtue does not need to be shown. Virtue doesn't need to be recognized. Is basically what the Tao Te Ching says.
Yeah, and they of course are doing what is known as virtue signaling. They're just trying to show everyone how evolved they are. Yeah, exactly. Boasting about how, like, I'm so tolerant that I'll let this guy come in here and take a dump on my living room floor. I'm that tolerant. And you're like, you're an idiot. You know,
You're an idiot.
this is madness. There's, and also, you know, safe spaces and all this stuff. And I've gotten it. You mentioned that you've seen me on Kev Baker's show. I love Kev.
Yeah.
Kev
I
is
love
like,
that guy's voice is so great for radio. He's such a professional too.
He's the Scottish guy, and he's got this, you know, this great Scottish accent, and he and I are into the same stuff. And I've been, you know, I email him every other day. We're complaining about this or that, but our favorite topic is social justice warriors. We love making fun of them because they're so easy to just destroy.
They do it to themselves, don't they?
Do it to themselves.
There's no logic to it, and it seems to be a generational thing too. It's mostly young people. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, mostly young people. And what I noticed is that, you know, when like a university will say, well, we've set up a safe space here, and if you're feeling threatened, you can come, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what exactly are you preparing? Are you a college, right? Or a university? You're supposed to be preparing kids for the real world. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Are they going to go to the office and the boss is going to tell them, what are you doing? You know, hurry up, or you were late. Or, hey, well, where is your safe space? Get the fuck out of here with your safe space. It doesn't exist in the real world. Now you go back to college and enjoy your safe space. But here in the real world, you want to show up and you're going to protest. I'll just fire you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so they're not doing themselves any favors. But look, I am all for helping those that are oppressed. And I'm also not out there. I'm not saying go out there and be a jerk to everybody, but when you're calling everybody a Nazi, but you know, when you're like, I'm a socialist and everything. And you people over there, you're all a bunch of Nazis. You're like, you do know that Nazi stands for National Socialist, don't you? You fucking retard. I mean, this is, you're a socialist and you're complaining about all these people and calling them Nazis when Nazis were supposed to be social. Anyway, it's just one of those things where you wind up, you're like, I'm not even going to debate these people because
that's that point I'm at too. And it's sad too, because you see it from minorities too, and not just one group. It seems to be, I don't know, just the collective university group almost. And I mean, I know young people personally who wouldn't listen to anything you have to say, Charlie, because you are a white man who's like, you're the enemy. You're a middle-aged white man, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just so closed-minded and backwards and racist too. It's like you cannot tell me to not, you know, that you're, you know, more open-minded than me when you can't even talk to someone based on their skin color. You know, it's hypocrisy at the highest level.
For sure. And look, I acknowledge, as a white man, there have been some white men that have done some horrible stuff. Yes, I'm very much aware of that. But it's like anything else. You know, you can if you want to brand the whole group, you know, you want to label it, you say all black people are this, and you're like, oh, or all white people are this, and then you're automatically putting yourself in a situation where you know, you're not going to be able to defend that argument for too long, because it just takes a couple people to come out and say, well, I'm a white male, I'm a good guy, I don't go around treating people like garbage and things like that. I mean, if you're jerky to me, I'll probably try to avoid you. But if it's confrontational, it's like, all right, well, we'll have the debate then. Let's do it. And but for the most part, the social justice warriors don't do themselves any favor, because, you know, they're not, especially if they're still like in school, and being in school, you're in a whole different universe that's not real life, and things that happen to you there don't happen in the real world. And that's why so many people that go out, you know, that are done with school, they're like, oh man, I would love to be in college again, because it's not the real world. It's a lot better. And and if you're having problems in college with everybody being unfair, just wait until you get out of college. You're going to see you're going to find. So like, as an example, I'll talk to you about some white privilege here for a second. I went to USC in Los Angeles. And when I would go, after I got out of college, when I would go on job interviews, I would find that from time to time, I would interview with a guy who'd be like, you went to USC? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I went to USC too. That's awesome. Like, oh, cool. Give me, you know, a handshake or give me a hug or whatever. And you're like, oh, cool. So, and then I would expect the interview to continue, and it'd be like, oh, dude, look, the interview's over. It's good. We're going to hire you. It's fine. I'd be like, okay. So that stuff happens. That stuff really happens. But
there's a secret handshake, and Matthew Weiner talks about this. He's the creator of Mad Men. I was watching an interview, and he's making the point nowadays that intelligence can pop up anywhere. But he says that despite that, he thinks that there's still a secret handshake among the Ivy Leaguers and the elite schools.
For sure. And the irony of the whole thing is that I went to USC and I graduated from there with a degree in marketing, but I didn't like the school at all. I honestly couldn't wait to get out of there. And I'm not one of those guys that's like, yeah, go USC, fuck UCLA. I don't care one way or the other. But a lot of people do. A lot of people that went to that school. So just having that on my resume was enough for people to be like, dude, it's fine. We're going to hire you, in Southern California specifically. So there is some of that goes on. So when people say, there's white privilege and you guys, I'm here to tell you, there is white privilege for sure. There is. And I would be
everyone has privileges of some sort.
Everybody has privileges of some sort. So look, have I leveraged it? Yeah. I mean, if I'm applying for a job for a place where I want to work and the guy's going to give me a job because he thinks that I have something in common with him because he went to the same school, I'm not going to talk him out of it. I'll take the job and everything, but I understand that's how it works. But part of that, I also saw a real shitty group of people coming out of USC that were like really entitled and super arrogant and had daddy's money and all that stuff. And they were really like the worst types of people that you could to be around and to associate with.
People to be around.
Those are, and there's a lot of that. And so I wasn't in that group. Like I was on financial aid. And so I saw a different version of these schools.
Yeah.
But USC,
and that's another thing too, is not every student has the same experience of college. For some people it's a pounding the payment struggle. For other people, it's, it is what it is. For me, it was something I wish I had postponed because I wasn't at a state of mental health such that I could fully maximize my experience. That's in the past now, though, and I understand that. And this is something I talk about with Sam Samworth, who's a former prison guard in HMP Strangeways in England. He suffers with PTSD, and he talks about the importance of mental health for performance and such. But I went to a military school in high school before I went to the University of Wisconsin, and that was the first time that actually these things were starting to become popular. And in my first high school in Wisconsin, you would see a large spectrum. So maybe 30 or 40% of students had these. And then you'd get, 20, 30% they're quite poor kids. And then you get the middle class. And of course, then you get the doctors and everything. And then I went to the military school and everybody had the phones, right? And I was like, dang, these guys have money. And then I went to college and I was like, no, these kids have fucking money. Like, so it just made me realize the relativism of it, and just tying back to the different experiences in college that people have. For these rich kids, a lot of them, it's just a 4-year vacation.
For sure. And I went to boarding school for high school. So the kids I went to boarding school with were super wealthy families, but for whatever reason, the culture in my boarding school was everyone really downplayed it. It wasn't arrogant like that. It wasn't like my dad can buy and sell you. Actually, there was one kid that did that, and that whole thing, like my dad can buy and sell you. And we just totally just ostracized that kid. We wanted nothing to do with him. But for the most part, all the people that I went to boarding school with were very smart and very, came from good homes, but they were good people too. So I expected that would transfer when I went to USC, but it didn't. Because what I got there was the same level of wealth from these kids, but with an arrogance and an attitude and the whole thing, like
different level of ethics.
Yeah, you'll be working for me one day, man. And you're like, oh, gross. So there's a lot of there was that, and of course the irony of this whole thing is that USC is the school that all those parents got busted trying to buy their way in. All the kids that were buying their way in was that school. And if ever there was a school where you could buy your way in, it's USC. Believe me, you can buy your way in there. It's not that hard. You just
I'm sure it's happening at every one of these big schools. I'm sure it's happening at Wisconsin, all the Ivy Leagues, and that's the thing with like these legacy admissions too, is like you only get in if your dad was in or if your mom was in, and it's becoming defined, the value of the degree, almost exclusively by the fact that only so many people do get in, like we mentioned earlier with the scarcity principle, is if Harvard and Yale were seriously about education, they would double their enrollment next year. But they're not going to fucking do that. Like all of the grads, they would not like that at all, because why? It's opening the gates to more and more people, which decreases the value of the degree that they have.
Well, I'll tell you a story it's funny, but it's also really sad. And it's a 100% true, because I saw it with my own eyes. So when I was a senior at my boarding school, I had a really good friend of mine who was a better student than me, better athlete than me, a better person. I mean, he was just a better guy all the way around. And we both applied to USC. Now, his dad had gone to USC. His dad was the captain of the football team, won a national championship, went on to play pro football. The guy who, like USC loves these legacy, they love if they've got a guy there and then his kid wants to go, it's like a guaranteed you're in, right? So, so he gets so we both apply, and I don't get this letter that he gets. He gets a letter that comes back and says, we just want to confirm the information on your application, that your name is this, that you go to this school, that you're African-American, which he wasn't, he's white, that your GPA is this. If anything is incorrect, please check it on this paper and send it back. And I saw the paper. So, I mean, I know it's a real thing. And he's like, yeah, I'm not African-American. I'm actually white. He folds it up, puts it in the the envelope, mails it that following day. The day after that, he gets a letter from USC saying, we regret to inform you that your application has been denied. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't get into USC. And I was like, how did that happen? He's like, I don't know. Now, keep in mind, he had just, that letter that he sent didn't have time to get to USC. So he gets
that's what I was thinking too. I was like, how did the mail come back so quickly?
He gets the rejection letter from USC. 10 days later, he gets a new letter from USC saying, congratulations, you've been accepted. Once they had time to process that he was actually white and not black, he got a new letter that said, congratulations, you've been accepted. I saw these letters. I saw all three of them with my own eyes.
So there was a mistake in...
When he was black, he wasn't getting in.
Yeah.
When he was white, he got in.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't want to go to that school if that's going to be, and he wound up going to a different school instead, but because he was a principled guy and a decent human being. And he was like, that's gross to me. I don't want anything to do with that. But I saw the
opposite nowadays. Cause you said that was during
exactly.
Right, Charlie.
Nowadays
it's like, and look, I'll admit it too. I'm a minority and that benefits me nowadays. Now it would benefit me more if I was a woman who was black or Asian, but
well, and look, and for so long it had been, the education system, like the university system, had been exclusively for white people. So the fact that they're making it so that it's acceptable to minorities is a good thing. I mean, I have no problem with that.
I have
no problem with that. It should have been that way all along. It should have been like you're just. Actually, you know what? It should be that race isn't even, you don't even ask that question. And then they're just measured on their merits and or whatever. Yeah. But maybe that's just how they prep you for the real world where, you go out, welcome to planet or welcome to the United States where things aren't fair and there are still racist people and you're judged based on sometimes on the way you look and not necessarily and who you know and things like that. And that's just unfortunate, but that is a lot of times the way the world works. It made me see things differently. And then I got a little bit of that same treatment going to USC and being on financial aid, because what I discovered was that there was always a hold on my registration. Like I couldn't register for classes when there was a certain day for it. I'd have to go to the financial aid office and do this. And then I'd have to go, they'd say, oh, you're at the wrong office. You have to go to that office. And I'd go there and they'd say, no, you have to go back to finance. And so I get this runaround. And then while I was doing that over the course of 3 days, everyone else was registering for their classes. And then I'd get it sorted out. And then I'd have to pick through and have to have 8 a.m. accounting classes. Right. But then it got to a point where my last semester of my senior year, where this had happened the whole time, I remember saying to my roommate, I think I know what they're doing here. I think it doesn't matter if I go to the financial aid office or that other office or this office. I don't think any of it matters. I think that what it is if you're on financial aid, they just put a hold on your account till all the kids get to pick out, the kids that just wrote the check. They get to pick their classes, and then you magically get, the hold will get removed 3 days later. So I said to my roommate, this is what I'm going to do. It was time to register for classes. There was a hold on my account. I said, I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to sit here and literally do nothing. I'm not going to a financial aid office. I'm not making a phone call. I'm not doing anything. And I bet you by Wednesday, that hold gets removed. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. That actually happened to me. A similar story happened to me too. When I first got there, I would like freak out about, well, not freak out, but just, be concerned about getting into that scheduling when I wanted to. But later on, I was just like, whatever, man. Like, I don't know. It's the administration. And this is something that Mr. Samwer talks about too in jail, is jails can run without the administration. They don't need the administration. And it seems to be the problem in these institutions. And since we are talking about the educational system in the United States, especially the educational system, the administration seems to be the problem. And you made me just think, because I was watching one of your videos and it mentioned Common Core, or you were doing a monologue and you had one of your slides up. It was about Common Core. And your videos, your video intro is awesome, Charlie.
Thank you.
Podcast. It is so cool. It's really entertaining. Did you edit that together yourself?
I picked out all the clips I wanted, but I gave it to a guy that actually knew I said I wanted to start at this point and this point, and then I figured out the order. But someone put all the technical parts together in that. And one of my favorite parts is the footage, and I think a lot of people have seen it, of Bill Gates getting out of like a limo and he's like waving to everyone, and then out of the blue, this dude with a big pie just comes out and just smashes it right in his face. Yeah. I love that. And since you brought up Common Core, one of the things I rail on about Common Core is that, or just in general, this education system. And I won't go too far. We'll talk a little bit about it, and then we'll wrap it up because we've gone for 2 hours. But
okay, yeah, and I would love to go again with you sometime, Charlie.
Oh, for sure, absolutely, for sure. I enjoy talking about this stuff with you because you're into it, and nobody wants to talk to me about this at home. So
yeah, and that's what I love about the internet, Charlie. Is like I can, and Twitter too. And you should get into Twitter, Charlie, because anyone who's pushing a book, I think it's the place to be.
I would love to. I have no followers now. I had to start all over again.
Yeah. You just got to stay not banned for a little bit.
I know.
I'll start retweeting you and stuff.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, I love it because you can find all these communities of weirdos like you who are really, whether it's really introverted on the spectrum or just completely normal, but they're interested in this stuff. You can find them on the internet now.
I know.
Likewise with you, I don't feel comfortable talking to my family about this.
I know.
Or my friends, rarely, if at all. So finding other people to chat with, I think, is important, not only for that reason, but for those reasons I mentioned earlier about this country.
For sure. And I feel the same way. It's just, it's great to be able to communicate with people, and people can go to my website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com, and they can contact me there too. I'm totally accessible. I'm, chat with people.
I'll put all your links in the description box too.
Cool,
and as soon as I get your Twitter too, I'll do that. Your podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Iconic on David Icke's media platform, and then iHeartRadio as well. Is that correct, Charlie?
And YouTube, and I've got a YouTube channel, but I've only got 1,000. I got 1,000 subscribers there, which is, it's anything I get from YouTube is bonus, because I know at some point it'll go away. So I just use them.
Yeah, that's probably a good assumption to make, given your content. But
given my history.
Try to put, as I said earlier, try to put your social links in your YouTube, Charlie, just so people know that it's your official. Because at first I thought it was a fan account. That was just reposting your stuff that they found on the internet, but it is your actual account.
It's mine.
And you are posting also interview videos that you've done with RT. And the like as well.
Yeah. I'm trying to post on my website is all this stuff, everything. I've got all the videos from interviews I've done. From the only one I don't have up there is Coast to Coast, but But it's available if someone wants to find that. I did Coast to Coast. That was kind of fun. But because I'm such a geek that I grew up listening to it, and the fact that they wanted to have me on, I was like, okay, I'll do it. Yeah, I have to stay up till 3:00 in the morning. I don't care. I'll just drink a ton of coffee and just be like all jacked up and wired for it. But back to what we were just saying about the school, and we'll end it with this with Common
Definitely.
Core. I mean, Common Core is this new school curriculum that has been introduced in the United States. And, there's an interesting thing that happens when you become this wealthy industrialist. You've bought everything you can buy. You've bought politicians. Then you want to change the schools to shape them in your image. So the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegies, they're the ones that brought forth this compulsory schooling, and they put all the desks in single file lines to emulate the single file lines at their factories. And they had the bell ring when class is over, when school's over, just like they have the bells ring in their factory. So it was like a breeding ground to get kids conditioned to a life of working in these factories that these guys had built. So they wanted to use that. So what happens with Common Core, and who's behind it? Well, Bill Gates is behind it. What a surprise. He wants to go in there and screw up and shape the kids' minds in a way that fits him. Well, Common Core's math division is so backwards that the guy that was one of the only PhD in mathematics from Stanford, he said he wouldn't sign his name. He wouldn't put his name on the curriculum because it was so screwed up. And now he spends his money out of his own pocket, flying around the country, giving lectures, talking against Common Core. And he was one of the guys that was doing the math. So it's just this system that is intentionally designed to screw up kids and ruin their confidence and make them feel like they're stupid. And it's very devious. And of course, Bill Gates is involved in it. He's put a ton of money in it. And he also owns he's involved with the companies that make the textbooks and have, they have permanent contracts with the state in order to be the only ones licensed to do the textbooks. So, he's got to make money off that too. I mean, it's frustrating for me. It's frustrating for kids. And it's almost as if every institution that is there, that is purported to be there for our own benefit, is actually actively working against us. And it's really frustrating. And that's Common Core. So if you're a kid, probably not. If you're a kid doing Common Core, you're probably not watching this video. But if you're a parent with a kid that's involved in Common Core, and you're starting to hear some rumblings from your kid, or your kid's going, I don't like this, I feel stupid at math, and I don't want to go back to school. This is what's happening with a lot of kids. The Common Core curriculum is designed to make you feel stupid. It's literally saying that if you can show your work that 3 times 4 equals 11, you'll get partial credit for it.
Yeah.
And if you just put 3 times 4 equals 12 and you don't show your work, you get it marked wrong. So it's crazy.
Yeah. And that actually frustrated me growing up, that type of teaching. I don't know if it was Common Core per se, because I don't know exactly when it was implemented, but just looking at the pictures of the worksheets that you had on your YouTube channel with regards to math, it's there's no logic to it at all. There's no rationality to the way they're teaching math. But as we mentioned earlier, guys, all of Charlie Robinson's links will be in the description box below. Please go give him a subscription on YouTube. He just hit 1K subscribers, which is awesome. I actually have been, as I said, listening to some of your content this week, Charlie, and I've noticed you every day you keep growing, which is great. And you just made your channel. So, and I'm looking forward, once I do get a hand on a copy of your book, to read that as well.
Right.
And after we end the broadcast too, if you want to chat for a sec before you take off, Charlie, that'd be awesome.
For sure.
But thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode of Addy Chats. This was Charlie Robinson, author of The Octopus of Global Control. New episodes coming soon tomorrow and this weekend with Sam Samworth and John Wedger as well. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a great Friday night.